Today, I'll be sharing with you two scandalous love stories from the Middle Ages. The first one involves two 12th century scholars, while the second one is the love story between a monk and a nun from the 15th century. Our first story begins in the early part of the 12th century in France. Peter Abelard, who was born in the year 1079, was a French composer, musician, philosopher, logician, and poet. He was considered one of the leading scholars of the 12th century. Well, it was the year 1115, and Peter was teaching at the school of Notre Dame in Paris when he had a student named Heloise. Heloise was 15 years old at this time, while Peter was 36. Heloise was known as the most well-educated and intelligent woman in Paris, and was well-versed in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. During their time as student and teacher, a romance blossomed. Peter had convinced her uncle, Canon Fulbert, whom she was living with at the time, to let him be her private tutor. So for this relationship, both Heloise and Peter claimed to have been the ones to initiate it, with Peter calling it a premeditated seduction, and Heloise writing that she sought him out from the thousands of men at Notre Dame. There's many documented letters from both Peter and Heloise, and Peter would always make sure to point out her intelligence and how that was one of the things he loved about her and caused him to pursue her. This relationship ultimately led to Heloise becoming pregnant. Once learning of this outcome, Peter sent her away to his sister's home in Brittany in order to keep the pregnancy a secret and to protect her from her uncle. Heloise gave birth to a son, and of course at this point her uncle was well aware of what had happened. Her uncle insisted that they marry, and although there was hesitation from the pair, they did end up getting married. It was a secret wedding, however. Heloise wanted to keep things a secret in order to not compromise his career, and Peter, having taken vows to the church, knew that being married would have consequences with his position as a priest and moving forward in the church. The agreement between them was that this marriage would be kept a secret, and they would be able to live in the home with Heloise's uncle. Well, this arrangement didn't last long. Fulbert broke his promise and started to tell people in the town about the marriage. Heloise would deny the marriage, which of course made her uncle furious. Peter then had her sent to a convent in order to protect her from her angry and abusive uncle. And of course, this did not make her uncle any happier. So when finding out that Heloise had been sent away to live elsewhere, he planned a terrible attack on Peter. He hired a group of men to sneak into Peter's room and castrate him. I mean, can you just imagine what that scene must have looked like? Alone in the night with no one to help you, having to somehow get yourself up and go outside and find help. Now, the men involved in this attack, including Heloise's uncle, were punished for the crime and even publicly shamed, but the damage had already been done. Peter retired from Notre Dame, and his dreams of having a higher position in the church were shattered. He was ridiculed by some for having been castrated, so he carried quite a bit of shame for this. Peter decided to go into hiding and became a monk at a monastery outside of Paris. During this time, he wrote to Heloise and urged her to take vows as a nun. Whether it was because he didn't want her to be with anybody else or he just wanted to make sure that she always stayed protected, we'll never really know. But she didn't really have many other options in the end, and becoming a nun would still give her opportunities with a career in academia. Despite the tragic events, Heloise and Peter continued their love affair from afar. They wrote letters to each other for years, but in the end, Peter wrote to her and told her that their relationship was a sin against God. He asked Heloise to turn her attention to Jesus Christ, who is the true source of love. And in return, her response was that she did not believe that his love for her could die. Now, there's still kind of a happy ending for these two lovers. When Peter passed away, his remains were taken to Heloise, and 20 years after his passing, Heloise was laid to rest alongside Peter. It's become tradition for people to leave letters at their tomb, either as a tribute to them or from singles hoping to one day find true love that will last forever. Now, the love story between Heloise and Peter Abelard is interesting because it really shows the connection they had with each other. It was a deeper connection and not just something based on lust. It was a relationship that lasted many years despite the tragic events, and they really had something to talk about, and they would push each other intellectually with their knowledge and questions of the world at that time. Now, our next story begins in the 15th century and involves the famous and talented painter Filippo Lippi. Filippo Lippi was born in Florence in 1406. He became an orphan at the age of 2 and then lived with his aunt until the age of 8 when she could no longer care for him. So she took him to a convent so that he could be cared for, and by the age of 16, Filippo had taken his religious vows within the community of Carmelite friars and became a monk. That didn't do much to tame him though, because it's rumored that he had quite a few romantic adventures with women throughout his life. By 1436, however, he did personally quit the monastery, but was not released of his vows. So after going through some things in his life, he did later become known for his art and even caught the eye of Cosimo de' Medici, who was a big patron of the arts in Florence, as many of the Medici were. In 1456, while living in Prato, which is just outside of Florence, he began working on some frescoes inside the cathedral there. And this is where the scandalous love story begins. Filippo, who was 50 years old at that time, met and fell in love with the beautiful 21-year-old Lucrezia Buti, who was a nun at the convent. Lucrezia was born in Florence, but her parents died when she was young, so she was sent to Prato to be under the care of the Sisters of Santa Margherita. When Filippo first saw Lucrezia, he was enchanted by her beauty and immediately wanted to use her as the inspiration for his paintings. He thought her face was absolutely breathtaking and that she would be the perfect model for his Madonna in the altarpiece. He got permission from the other nuns in the convent so that Lucrezia could sit and model for him for his paintings. He painted her in his fresco cycle of the stories of Saint Stephen and Saint John the Baptist inside the cathedral in Prato, and she was also his model for several of his famous Madonna and Child paintings. So with every day that passed, he fell more and more in love with Lucrezia, and perhaps she was falling a little bit in love with him too. One day during the procession of the festival of the Sacra Cintola, or the Holy Bell, it is said that Filippo kidnapped her and took her to his home. Although it could be that they planned it this way and she willingly snuck away with him to his home, we'll never really know. The nuns tried to get her to come back to the monastery, but Lucrezia remained at Filippo's home, and Filippo also never really tried to get her to go back, so she just remained at his home with him. Now, one interesting thing is that it's said that 3 of the nuns ended up moving into his home as well. Maybe they just wanted to keep an eye on Lucrezia and be there to look after her, as they had made that commitment to protect her long ago. The following year, in 1457, Lucrezia gave birth to their son Filippino, and in 1465 to their daughter. Filippino went on to become a talented artist just like his father, and if not even more famous and talented than him. But after everything that happened with Filippo and Lucrezia, Filippo was denounced as friar in 1461, and several years later, thanks to the help of Cosimo de' Medici, the Pope granted them a dispensation to marry. Well, you would think this is where this unconventional love story ends, but it's not quite over yet. Filippo had been living in other cities away from Lucrezia due to his art commissions and was said to have been having love affairs with other women during this time. So as they waited to make their union official, in 1469, before the official letter of dispensation to marry from the Pope had arrived, Filippo mysteriously dies. It's suspected that he may have been poisoned, and the rumors are that he was poisoned by either Lucrezia because she was upset he was having affairs with other women for all those years, or possibly one of his other love interests that did not want him to marry the beautiful mother of his children. So it's kind of shocking the way this love story just ended abruptly like that without any answers. Now, unlike Eloise and Peter, we don't have as many records with these two as far as love letters or other written documents go, but we do have this account from Giorgio Vasari, who's another Florentine artist that was born in the 16th century. So we can only wonder how accurate these accounts really are, and we'll just never really know what happened between Filippo and Lucrezia in the end. I'd like to think that they did really love each other, at least in the very beginning, and they did want to spend their lives together, but maybe Filippo just couldn't shake his old ways. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed these 2 scandalous love stories. Which one of these love stories did you enjoy hearing about? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like the video if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.